What if the person you dismiss, ignore, or even mock every single day possesses the power to change everything you think you know about strength? The fluorescent lights hum their monotonous tune across the sterile corridors of Meridian Corporate Tower, casting harsh shadows that seem to swallow the hunched figure moving methodically between cubicles. His name tag reads, Chen, in faded letters, though most people here don't bother reading it. They see only what they choose to see, a small, elderly Asian man with silver-streaked hair, pushing a wheeled cart loaded with cleaning supplies, his movements slow and deliberate, his eyes cast downward in what appears to be submission. Chen's weathered hands grip the mop handle with a gentleness that suggests fragility. Yet, if you looked closely, really looked, you might notice how his fingers curve around the wood with perfect balance, how his stance remains centered even as he bends to clean. But nobody looks closely at janitors. They are human furniture, existing in the peripheral vision of busy executives and ambitious middle managers who have far more important things to occupy their minds. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. The morning rush begins like a stampede of expensive shoes and designer briefcases. Marcus Henderson, the sales department's golden boy, strides through the lobby with the confidence of someone who has never questioned his place in the world's hierarchy. His Italian leather shoes click against the marble floor in a rhythm that sounds like entitlement itself. Behind him follows his usual entourage, colleagues who laugh too loudly at his jokes and nod too eagerly at his opinions. "Watch it, old man!" Marcus barks, as Chen quietly maneuvers his cart around the gathering crowd near the elevators. The words slice through the morning chatter, causing a ripple of uncomfortable silence that lasts exactly 3 seconds before everyone pretends nothing happened. Chen pauses, his grip tightening almost imperceptibly on the mop handle before continuing his work without a word. But something flickers in his eyes, just for a moment, like lightning behind storm clouds. The elevator doors open with a soft ding, and the corporate warriors file in, discussing quarterly projections and client meetings. Chen remains behind, methodically cleaning the same spot on the floor, his movements now carrying an almost meditative quality. To the casual observer, he appears defeated, diminished by the casual cruelty. Yet there's something in his posture that doesn't quite fit the narrative, a straightness to his spine that suggests roots running deeper than anyone might imagine. Sarah Martinez, a young analyst with kind eyes and a conscience still intact, lingers near the elevator bank. She watches Chen work, noting how he moves with an economy of motion that seems almost choreographed. When their eyes meet briefly, she offers a small smile and a nod of acknowledgement. Chen's response is subtle, a slight inclination of his head that somehow conveys more dignity than all of Marcus's bluster. "You don't have to be nice to the help, Sarah," calls Jennifer Walsh from across the lobby, her voice dripping with condescension. "They're used to being invisible." The comment draws snickers from the surrounding group, and Sarah's cheeks flush with embarrassment, not for herself, but for the casual cruelty she witnesses daily in this gleaming tower of ambition. As the morning progresses, the pattern repeats itself with numbing predictability. Chen moves through his duties like a ghost, encountering the small violences that society inflicts on those it deems unworthy of notice. Coffee spilled deliberately near his freshly mopped areas. Trash dropped just out of reach of wastebaskets. Conversations conducted over his head as if he lacks the capacity for human language. Each incident is minor, forgettable to those who perpetrate them. But they accumulate like drops of water, wearing away stone, creating something harder and more purposeful in their wake. During his lunch break, Chen sits alone in the building's small prayer garden, a token gesture toward wellness culture that most employees ignore. He unwraps a simple meal from brown paper, his movements precise and unhurried. As he eats, his eyes scan the small space with an attention to detail that seems excessive for a man consuming a sandwich. He notices the way the bamboo plants lean toward the light, how the small fountain's water follows the path of least resistance, how the stones are arranged in patterns that speak of ancient principles most people have forgotten. A maintenance worker approaches, radiating the easy camaraderie of shared invisibility. "Tough morning?" he asks, settling onto the bench beside Chen. Chen chews thoughtfully before responding, his voice soft, but carrying an unusual weight. "Every morning teaches something new," he says, and though the words seem simple, they carry undertones that suggest depths the other man doesn't quite grasp. The afternoon brings fresh humiliations. Marcus, emboldened by his morning's success in asserting dominance, decides to make Chen's existence a running joke for his colleagues' entertainment. He begins dropping crumpled papers just out of reach, forcing Chen to stretch and bend in ways that emphasize his apparent frailty. The audience laughs on cue, their discomfort with their own behavior masked by the easy cruelty of pack dynamics. But Chen doesn't react the way they expect. Instead of growing more servile or desperate to please, something almost imperceptible shifts in his demeanor. His movements become more economical, more centered. When he bends to retrieve their deliberate messes, he does so with a fluidity that seems to defy his apparent age and condition. Jennifer notices it first, the way Chen's balance never wavers, how he seems to anticipate movement before it happens. "There's something weird about that old guy," she murmurs to Marcus during a break between humiliation sessions. "Have you noticed how he moves?" Marcus dismisses her observation with a wave. "You're overthinking it. He's just trying not to get fired, probably practiced being pathetic his whole life." As the day winds toward evening, Chen completes his rounds with the same methodical precision he began with. But now, there's something different in the air around him. A tension that wasn't present in the morning, like the moment before thunder breaks. He pauses at the large windows overlooking the city, his reflection ghost-like in the glass, and for just a moment, his posture straightens to its full height. The transformation is subtle, but unmistakable. The hunched shoulders square, the downcast eyes lift, and suddenly the face in the reflection belongs to someone entirely different, someone who has seen battles these corporate warriors couldn't imagine, someone who has walked paths they've never dreamed existed. E essa história te lembrar de algo que viveu, compartilhe sua experiência nos comentários. Ela pode tocar o coração de alguém hoje. Agora, respire fundo e prepare-se para uma jornada que pode mudar sua forma de ver o mundo. As Chen returns to his cart and begins the evening routine, Marcus approaches with his usual swagger, ready to deliver another casual cruelty. But this time, when their eyes meet, something passes between them. A recognition that runs deeper than consciousness, older than words. For just an instant, Marcus falters, his confidence wavering as if he's glimpsed something that doesn't belong in his carefully ordered world. "What are you looking at, old man?" Marcus demands, but his voice carries a tremor that wasn't there before. Chen's response is barely audible, yet it seems to fill the entire corridor. "I am looking at a man who has forgotten how to see." The words hang in the air like a challenge, and Marcus feels something shift in the foundation of his certainty. But before he can process what's happening, Chen has already turned away, resuming his work with movements that now seem less like submission and more like the patient preparation of someone who knows exactly what's coming next. But what Marcus doesn't realize is that some disguises are not meant to hide weakness. They're meant to contain power until the moment it's needed most. The human mind is a strange vessel. It can bury mountains of memory beneath decades of silence, yet a single moment can unearth entire worlds that were never truly forgotten. That evening, as Chen makes his way through the empty corridors of Meridian Tower, his footsteps echo with a rhythm that seems to awaken something dormant in his muscle memory. The mop handle in his hands transforms, if only for fleeting seconds, into something else entirely. A staff, a sword, a weapon forged not in factories but in the fires of discipline and dedication. His reflection in the polished floor tiles shows not one man, but two, the hunched janitor the world sees, and beneath that carefully constructed facade, someone whose very bones remember what it means to move with purpose. The security guard at the main desk nods absently as Chen signs out, barely glancing up from his smartphone. Another invisible departure from another invisible man. But as Chen steps into the cool night air, his transformation begins in earnest. The weight he carries on his shoulders, not physical but something far heavier, seems to redistribute itself as he walks. His stride lengthens almost imperceptibly, his breathing deepens, and by the time he reaches the small apartment building 6 blocks away, he moves with the fluid certainty of water, finding its natural course. His apartment is a study in deliberate simplicity. No television, no clutter, no evidence of the consumer culture that defines his co-workers' lives. Instead, there are books, some in English, others in languages that would surprise those who assume his intelligence based on his accent and occupation. Ancient texts sit beside modern philosophy, creating a library that spans centuries and continents. But it's the empty space in the center of the main room that tells the real story. A space kept deliberately clear, its wooden floor worn smooth by decades of practice. Chen sets down his work clothes with the same methodical precision he brings to everything, then stands at the edge of that empty space. For a moment he simply breathes, letting the day's accumulated tensions drain from his body like water from a broken dam. Then, without conscious decision, his body begins to move. It starts slowly, almost like a dance. His arms flow through patterns that seem random to the untrained eye, but follow principles older than the cities outside his window. Each movement connects to the next with mathematical precision, creating forms that speak of traditions passed down through generations of teachers and students who understood that the body is both weapon and temple. As he moves, memories surface unbidden. Not the sharp, painful recollections that haunt some people's nights, but gentle waves of remembrance that wash over him like familiar music. He is 7 years old again, standing in a courtyard where cherry blossoms drift like snow, watching his master demonstrate the same movements with a grace that made the impossible seem effortless. The old man's voice echoes across the decades. Strength that announces itself is not strength at all, Chen. True power lies in the space between action and reaction, in the pause before the storm. The apartment walls seem to dissolve as Chen's practice deepens, replaced by memories of mountain monasteries where the air itself seemed to hum with ancient wisdom. He remembers the weight of tradition settling on his young shoulders, the pride and burden of being chosen to carry forward teachings that had survived dynasties and disasters. He recalls the day he first understood that his training was not about fighting. It was about becoming a guardian of something precious and fragile in a world that seemed determined to destroy everything beautiful. But memories, like shadows, can hide as much as they reveal. As Chen transitions from one form to another, his movements suddenly sharpen, becoming more angular, more aggressive. The peaceful practice session fractures, replaced by flashes of conflict that his conscious mind has spent years trying to forget. The sound of breaking wood, the taste of blood, the weight of decisions that once made can never be unmade. He stops abruptly, his breathing ragged, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool temperature. The apartment reasserts itself around him, solid and present, but the ghosts of his past hover at the edges of his vision like uninvited guests. He moves to a small altar in the corner, simple, unadorned, except for a photograph of an elderly Chinese man whose eyes seem to hold the weight of centuries. Master Liu. Chen whispers, his voice carrying a reverence that would surprise those who know him only as a quiet janitor. I have kept my promise. I have remained hidden, remained peaceful, remained small. The words carry the weight of decades of discipline, of a vow made in circumstances that those who mock him daily could never comprehend. But promises, even sacred ones, can become prisons when the world changes around them. The next morning arrives with the same fluorescent harshness as always, but something in Chen has shifted during the night. As he pushes his cart through the corridors of Meridian Tower, his movements carry traces of the previous evening's practice. The way he pivots around corners, the perfect balance as he reaches for high shelves, the unconscious efficiency of his motions, all speak of training that goes far beyond janitorial work. Sarah Martinez notices it first, as she often does. There's something different about the way Chen carries himself today, something that makes her pause at her cubicle and watch him work. When he reaches for a fallen paper that's blown under a desk, his movement is so fluid, so perfectly controlled, that it looks choreographed. For just a moment, she glimpses the ghost of someone else. Someone who belongs not in corporate corridors, but in ancient courtyards where masters and students practiced arts that most people know only from movies. Still being weird about the janitor? Jennifer's voice cuts through Sarah's observation like a blade. You know, if you're that desperate for charity work, there are actual organizations for that. Sarah's cheeks burn, but not from embarrassment this time. Something about Jennifer's casual cruelty, combined with her growing awareness of Chen's hidden depths, ignites a protective instinct she didn't know she possessed. Maybe if we paid attention to people instead of treating them like furniture, we'd learn something, she replies, her voice carrying an edge that surprises them both. The exchange doesn't go unnoticed. Chen, methodically cleaning nearby, hears every word, and something in Sarah's defense strikes a chord that resonates with half-remembered teachings about honor and the protection of those who show kindness in cruel places. His master's voice echoes again. A warrior's first duty is not to the strong, but to those who stand up for what is right, even when it costs them. As the day progresses, Chen finds himself paying closer attention to the dynamics around him. He begins to see patterns in the office hierarchy that mirror the power structures he once studied in very different contexts. Marcus's behavior follows the predictable patterns of a bully who has never faced real consequences, while his followers exhibit the cowardice of those who trade their integrity for proximity to perceived power. But it's the smaller moments that capture Chen's attention. The way Sarah subtly deflects cruel comments aimed at others, how she shares her lunch with a new intern who forgot to bring money, the genuine kindness she shows to everyone regardless of their position in the corporate food chain. In her actions, he recognizes something his master taught him to value above all else, the courage to remain compassionate in a world that rewards cruelty. During his afternoon cleaning rounds, Chen finds himself in Marcus's office, wiping down surfaces that gleam with the polish of success. The walls are covered with awards, photographs of Marcus with important-looking people, evidence of a career built on charm and ruthless ambition. But Chen's trained eye notices other details, the way Marcus's desk is positioned to dominate the room, the subtle intimidation tactics built into the office's very design, the casual displays of wealth meant to reinforce hierarchy. As he works, Chen's reflection appears in the polished surface of Marcus's desk, and for a moment, two faces look back at him. The subservient janitor the world expects to see, and beneath that mask, someone whose understanding of power runs deeper than quarterly reports and corner offices. Someone who learned long ago that true strength is not about domination, but about the discipline to use power only when necessary and only in service of something greater than oneself. Marcus enters unexpectedly, catching Chen in his moment of reflection. "What are you doing staring at yourself in my desk?" he demands, his voice carrying the automatic aggression of someone who interprets everything as a potential challenge to his authority. Chen straightens slowly, meeting Marcus's gaze with eyes that seem to hold depths the younger man has never imagined. "I was cleaning," he says simply, but something in his tone makes Marcus pause. For just an instant, Marcus feels as if he's looking at someone completely different, someone who sees through his expensive suit and polished confidence to something raw and unformed beneath. The sensation is so unsettling that he steps back involuntarily, then immediately overcompensates with increased aggression. "Well, clean faster," Marcus snaps. "Some of us have real work to do." Chen nods and returns to his tasks, but as he moves around the office, Marcus finds himself unable to look away. There's something hypnotic about the janitor's movements, something that suggests depths and disciplines that don't belong in this corporate world. But what Marcus doesn't understand is that he's not just watching a man clean an office. He's witnessing the careful preparation of someone who has spent a lifetime learning to hide in plain sight, waiting for the moment when concealment becomes impossible and ancient training must rise to meet modern challenges. There comes a moment in every person's life when the universe tests the depth of their convictions, when staying true to your principles becomes a choice between who you were and who you must become. The escalation begins on a Tuesday morning that seems identical to countless others, but carries within it the seeds of transformation that will alter everything. Marcus Henderson arrives at Meridian Tower, riding the high of a successful client presentation the previous day, his confidence inflated to dangerous proportions. Success, for men like Marcus, is not a destination, but a drug. And like all addictions, it demands increasingly potent doses to achieve the same effect. Chen is already at work, methodically polishing the brass fixtures in the lobby, when Marcus sweeps through the entrance with his usual entourage. But today, something in Marcus's demeanor has shifted. His cruelty, once casual and almost reflexive, now carries a calculated edge that suggests he's begun to view his treatment of Chen as a form of entertainment that can be refined and perfected. "Hey, old man," Marcus calls out, his voice carrying across the marble expanse with deliberate volume. "You missed a spot yesterday. Jennifer's office still smells like whatever cheap cleaning products you use." The accusation is false. Chen's work is meticulous to the point of obsession, but truth has never been the point of these exchanges. Several employees slow their morning routines to watch, some with the uncomfortable fascination of those witnessing a car accident, others with the guilty pleasure of schadenfreude. Chen continues his work without response, but something in the set of his shoulders suggests an internal struggle that grows more intense with each passing humiliation. Jennifer Walsh joins the performance with practiced enthusiasm. "Maybe we should get him one of those little bells," she suggests with mock helpfulness. "You know, like they put on cats so you know where they are. Then we wouldn't have to worry about him sneaking up on us." The suggestion draws laughs from the gathered audience, and Marcus's eyes light up with the cruel inspiration of someone who has discovered a new way to assert dominance. "That's not a bad idea," he muses, pulling out his phone. "I bet I can order one of those pet collars with a little bell. What do you think, Chen? Would you like a nice collar to help you do your job better?" The words hang in the air like a challenge, and for the first time since this morning's harassment began, Chen stops what he's doing. His hands, still gripping the cleaning cloth, tremble almost imperceptibly, not with fear, but with the effort of containing something that wants desperately to be released. When he finally looks up, his eyes meet Marcus's with an intensity that makes the younger man's confident smile waver slightly. "I do not need a collar," Chen says quietly, his voice carrying undertones that seem to resonate in the marble walls themselves. "I know exactly where I am." Something in his response unsettles the watching crowd. The words are simple, even submissive on the surface, but they carry a weight that doesn't match their apparent meaning. Marcus feels a flicker of unease, as if he's suddenly aware that he's playing a game whose rules he doesn't fully understand. But bullies, like predators, often mistake their victims' restraint for weakness. Instead of backing down, Marcus doubles down on his aggression, interpreting Chen's quiet response as invitation to push further. The harassment campaign intensifies over the following days, with a systematic cruelty that reveals the depths of Marcus's character. He begins arriving early to strategically spill coffee in areas Chen has already cleaned, forcing the older man to redo his work while fighting the clock. He organizes his colleagues to drop trash in Chen's path, turning the simple act of walking through the office into a gauntlet of deliberately created obstacles. But it's the psychological warfare that proves most insidious. Marcus begins to weaponize Chen's invisibility, conducting conversations over his head that are designed to wound and humiliate. He discusses the hygiene problems of elderly immigrants, speculates loudly about Chen's living conditions, and makes jokes about putting old dogs out of their misery when he thinks performance is lacking. Each incident is carefully calibrated to stay just within the bounds of plausible deniability. If confronted, Marcus can always claim he was just joking, just having fun, just engaging in the kind of workplace banter that builds team spirit. It's the perfect system of abuse, cruel enough to inflict real damage, subtle enough to avoid consequences. Chen endures it all with a silence that grows more profound with each passing day. But those who know how to look, and Sarah Martinez is learning to look, can see the changes occurring beneath the surface. His movements become more economical, more precise, as if he's unconsciously conserving energy for something that requires tremendous effort. His breathing patterns shift, taking on the deep, controlled rhythms of someone practicing meditation or preparing for battle. The breaking point arrives not with the grand gesture Marcus has been building toward, but with a moment of casual cruelty that crosses a line even he didn't know existed. It happens during the lunch hour, when most employees are away from their desks. Sarah has stayed behind to finish a report, working in the relative quiet of the nearly empty office. She's focused on her computer screen when she hears voices from the break room, Marcus's voice, raised in the particular tone he uses when he wants to ensure his audience understands their role in his performance. "I'm telling you, it's getting pathetic," he's saying, his words carrying clearly through the thin walls. "The way he shuffles around here like some kind of beaten dog. At what point do we just admit that some people are meant to be servants?" Sarah's typing slows as she recognizes the target of Marcus's latest diatribe. Through the break room's glass door, she can see Chen methodically restocking the coffee supplies, his movements careful and deliberate as always. But she can also see something else, the way his hands pause fractionally at certain words, the slight tightening around his eyes that suggests he's processing every syllable of the cruel assessment. "Maybe we should start a pool," Jennifer suggests, her voice bright with manufactured enthusiasm. "Bet on how long it takes before he just gives up and quits. I give him another week before he realizes he doesn't belong here." "That's assuming he's smart enough to realize it," Marcus replies. "Some people are just too stupid to know when they're beaten." The words hit their target with surgical precision. Chen's hands stop moving entirely, his body going absolutely still in a way that reminds Sarah of the moment before lightning strikes. For several heartbeats, the only sound in the break room is the hum of the refrigerator and the distant traffic noise from the street below. Then Chen turns around, turns. The movement is fluid, controlled, and somehow inevitable, like the rotation of the earth or the changing of the tides. When he faces Marcus and Jennifer, his posture has changed completely. The hunched shoulders have squared, the downcast eyes have lifted, and suddenly the face looking back at them belongs to someone entirely different from the submissive janitor they thought they knew. "I beg your pardon," Chen says, his voice carrying a formality that seems to come from another era entirely. "Could you repeat what you just said?" Marcus, caught off guard by the direct confrontation, recovers with typical aggression. "You heard me, old man. I said some people are too stupid to know when they're beaten. Is that a problem for you?" Chen takes a single step forward, and something in that movement makes Marcus instinctively step back. The break room suddenly feels smaller, the air thicker, as if the very atmosphere has changed in response to Chen's shift in demeanor. "No," Chen says quietly, his eyes never leaving Marcus's face. "That is not a problem for me, but I think perhaps It should be a problem for you. The words are spoken softly, almost gently, but they carry a weight that makes Sarah's breath catch in her throat. She finds herself standing without conscious decision, moving toward the break room as if drawn by forces she doesn't understand. Marcus, his face flushing red with embarrassment and anger, takes refuge in volume and aggression. "Are you threatening me?" he demands, his voice cracking slightly. "Because if you are, you can pack up your little cart and get the hell out of here right now." Chen doesn't respond immediately. Instead, he seems to be considering something, weighing options, calculating consequences, balancing forces that exist beyond the mundane world of office politics and corporate hierarchies. When he finally speaks, his words carry the weight of decisions that will reshape everything that follows. "I am not threatening you," he says, each word carefully chosen and precisely delivered. "I am simply observing that wisdom often comes disguised as weakness, and that those who mistake the two do so at their own peril." The silence that follows is profound and unsettling. Marcus and Jennifer exchange glances, suddenly aware that they've stumbled into territory far more dangerous than they intended to explore. Sarah watches from the doorway, her heart pounding with the recognition that she's witnessing something transformative, a moment when carefully maintained facades begin to crack and reveal the truths hidden beneath. But what none of them realize is that Chen's words are not just philosophy, they're a warning. And in the ancient traditions he carries within him, warnings are always given exactly once before action becomes necessary. The question that hangs in the air, unspoken but understood by everyone present, is simple. What happens when someone finally pushes too far, and the master decides that his vow of silence has served its purpose? Sometimes the most profound transformations occur not in moments of grand decision, but in the split second when the heart overrides the mind and ancient instincts rise to meet impossible choices. The incident that changes everything happens on a Thursday evening when the Meridian Tower has settled into its after-hours quiet, most employees long gone to their suburban homes and evening routines. Sarah Martinez remains at her desk, wrestling with a complex financial analysis that refuses to yield to conventional approaches. The numbers dance before her tired eyes, stubborn in their refusal to tell the story her superiors want to hear. Chen moves through his evening routine with the same methodical precision as always, but something in the building's atmosphere feels different tonight, charged, like the air before a thunderstorm. His cartwheels whisper across the polished floors as he makes his way through the executive wing, where the real power in this corporate ecosystem resides. It's here in the hushed corridors where decisions affecting thousands of lives are made behind closed doors that Marcus Henderson has chosen to work late. Not from dedication to his duties, but because he's discovered that evening hours provide opportunities for the kind of behavior that daylight and witnesses tend to discourage. Sarah doesn't hear the initial confrontation. Absorbed in her spreadsheets, she misses the sound of Marcus's voice rising in the conference room 3 doors down from her cubicle. She doesn't notice when that voice takes on the particular edge that signals his transition from professional frustration to personal cruelty. It's only when she hears the crash, something glass shattering against a wall, that her attention snaps away from her computer screen. The sound reverberates through the empty office like a gunshot, followed by a silence so complete it seems to swallow sound itself. Sarah rises from her chair, every instinct telling her to investigate, while her rational mind counsels her to mind her own business. In the corporate world, curiosity about your colleague's behavior is rarely rewarded. But as she stands uncertain in her cubicle, she hears something that makes the decision for her. The sound of someone crying. The tears belong to David Kim, a soft-spoken intern, barely 3 weeks into his first corporate job. Fresh from college, still believing that hard work and honesty will be rewarded, David has made the mistake of questioning one of Marcus's expense reports, a minor discrepancy that any competent accountant would flag, but which Marcus has chosen to interpret as a personal attack on his integrity. Sarah moves toward the conference room, her heart rate accelerating with each step. Through the glass partition, she can see Marcus looming over David, who sits hunched in a chair like a child being scolded by an abusive parent. The intern's face is flushed with embarrassment and fear, his hands shaking as he tries to organize the papers scattered across the table. "You think you're smart, don't you?" Marcus's voice carries clearly through the thin walls, thick with the kind of rage that has been building for hours. "Fresh out of school? Think you know better than people who've been doing this job since before you were born?" David's response is barely audible, a stammered attempt at explanation that only seems to fuel Marcus's anger. Sarah watches in horror as Marcus sweeps his arm across the conference table, sending David's carefully organized files cascading to the floor. The young man scrambles to collect the scattered papers, his movements frantic and desperate. "Pick them up," Marcus commands, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carries more menace than shouting. "All of them. And while you're down there, maybe you can think about whether you're really cut out for this kind of work." It's humiliation designed to break something essential in David's spirit, the kind of systematic cruelty that turns bright young people into the walking wounded who populate corporate America's cubicles. Sarah feels her own hands shaking with anger and helplessness, recognizing the scene from her own early career when she was too young and inexperienced to defend herself against similar predators. But someone else has been watching too. Chen appears in the corridor like a shadow given substance, his cleaning cart abandoned somewhere behind him. Sarah didn't hear him approach, didn't sense his presence until he was simply there, standing at the conference room's glass door, with an expression she's never seen on his face before. Gone is the careful subservience, the downcast eyes, the hunched shoulders that signal submission. In their place stands someone whose very presence seems to alter the geometry of the space around him. His spine is straight, his breathing deep and controlled, and his eyes hold depths that make Sarah understand, with sudden clarity, that she has never actually seen this man before tonight. Marcus notices the interruption with the irritation of someone whose performance has been interrupted by an unwanted audience. "What do you want?" he snaps, not bothering to look directly at Chen. "Can't you see we're having a private conversation here?" Chen doesn't respond immediately. Instead, he observes the scene with the methodical attention of someone assessing a tactical situation. His gaze takes in David's tear-streaked face, the scattered papers, the broken glass from what was once a coffee mug, the way Marcus positions himself to maximize intimidation. When he finally speaks, his voice carries a quality Sarah has never heard before, quiet, but with an underlying resonance that seems to vibrate in the walls themselves. "The young man appears to be distressed," Chen says, each word carefully measured. "Perhaps it would be better if this conversation continued tomorrow, when emotions are not so elevated." Marcus turns fully toward Chen now, his face flushing with the particular rage of someone whose authority has been questioned by someone he considers beneath notice. "Did I ask for your opinion?" he demands, taking a step toward the older man. "This is none of your business. Go back to emptying trash cans and leave the real work to people who actually matter." But something has shifted in the conference room's atmosphere, as if the air itself has become denser, more charged. David stops scrambling for papers and looks up, sensing a change he can't identify. Sarah finds herself holding her breath, aware that she's witnessing something unprecedented but unable to predict what will happen next. Chen takes a single step into the conference room, and that simple movement seems to transform the entire dynamic. His presence doesn't dominate the space through aggression or volume. Instead, it fills the room like water finding its level, natural and inevitable and impossible to ignore. "You are correct," Chen says, his voice maintaining its careful modulation. "This young man's well-being is not my business. But treating another human being with basic dignity, that is everyone's business. Marcus's face contorts with rage at the implied criticism. "Are you lecturing me?" he snarls, closing the distance between them until he's standing directly in front of Chen, using his height advantage in an attempt to intimidate. "You want to know about dignity? Let me show you what happens to people who don't know their place." What happens next occurs so quickly that Sarah's eyes can barely process the sequence of events. Marcus reaches out to shove Chen, a gesture designed to establish physical dominance and reduce the older man to the helpless victim he appears to be. But Chen is no longer where Marcus expects him to be. The movement is so fluid, so perfectly controlled, that it seems choreographed. Chen simply shifts slightly to one side, and Marcus's aggressive push encounters only air. Off balance and overextended, Marcus stumbles forward, his momentum carrying him past his intended target. Chen's response is gentle, a light touch to Marcus's shoulder that seems designed to help him regain his balance. But the touch has an unexpected effect. Marcus spins around, suddenly off balance, not just physically, but mentally, as if the simple contact has disrupted something fundamental in his nervous system. "I would suggest," Chen says quietly, his hand still extended in what appears to be a gesture of assistance, "that you sit down and take a moment to collect yourself." It's not a command, barely even a suggestion, but something in Chen's tone makes Marcus's legs suddenly unsteady. He sinks into the nearest chair, not from choice, but from necessity, his face pale and confused, as if he's forgotten how he ended up on the floor just moments before. David stares in amazement, his tears forgotten, as he witnesses something that defies his understanding of office dynamics. Sarah feels her heart pounding as she realizes she's just witnessed something impossible. A demonstration of power so subtle and controlled that it appears to be nothing more than an old man offering assistance to someone who lost their balance. But Chen isn't finished. He moves around the conference table with the same fluid grace he displayed moments before, gathering David's scattered papers with movements so economical and precise they seem like a meditation. As he works, he speaks to the young intern in a voice that carries warmth Sarah has never heard from him before. "Your analysis was correct," Chen says, straightening a crumpled spreadsheet with careful attention. "The discrepancy you identified was significant and worthy of investigation. In my experience, accuracy in small matters often reveals larger truths." David blinks in surprise, not just at the validation, but at the sophistication of Chen's language, the depth of understanding implied in his words. You read my report?" Chen's smile is subtle but genuine. "I read many things that others overlook. It is a habit that has served me well over the years." Marcus struggles to his feet, his face cycling through confusion, embarrassment, and rising fury. "What the hell just happened?" he demands, his voice cracking with the strain of trying to reassert control over a situation that has slipped entirely beyond his comprehension. Chen turns to face him, and for just a moment, Sarah glimpses something in his expression that makes her understand why Marcus instinctively stepped back. It's not aggression or threat, it's something far more unsettling. It's the look of someone who sees through all pretense to the essential truth beneath, someone who has measured another person and found them profoundly wanting. "What happened?" Chen says, his voice carrying the weight of absolute certainty. "Is that you forgot yourself, but do not worry, such moments pass, and with them, the opportunity to make choices we cannot unmake." The words hang in the air like a prophecy, and Marcus seems to sense that he's standing at the edge of something far more dangerous than he intended to explore. His usual bluster falters, replaced by an uncertainty that transforms his entire demeanor. But what none of them understand, not Marcus, not David, not even Sarah, is that this moment of intervention has shattered something carefully maintained for decades. Chen's vow of invisibility, his commitment to remaining hidden in plain sight, has been broken by an impulse older and more powerful than his promise to his dead master. And once such barriers are broken, they can never be rebuilt exactly as they were before. In the ancient texts, there is a principle known as winning without fighting, the highest form of martial art, where victory is achieved not through force, but through understanding the enemy so completely that their defeat becomes inevitable. The transformation begins subtly, in ways so small that Marcus Henderson doesn't notice the ground shifting beneath his feet until it's far too late to regain his footing. To the casual observer, nothing has changed in the daily rhythm of Meridian Tower. Chen still arrives each morning with his cart, still moves through the corridors with apparent humility, still responds to casual cruelties with silence that seems born of resignation rather than strategy. But Sarah Martinez has learned to look deeper, and what she sees in the days following the conference room incident fills her with a mixture of anticipation and unease. Chen's movements have acquired a quality she can only describe as purposeful. Not the random efficiency of someone simply doing their job, but the calculated precision of someone executing a carefully planned campaign. It starts with Marcus's coffee. Every morning, Marcus follows the same routine: a large latte with an extra shot of espresso from the machine in the executive break room, consumed while reviewing the day's schedule. It's a ritual of privilege. The executive-level coffee machine is off-limits to lower-tier employees, a small but significant symbol of hierarchy in the corporate ecosystem. Chen has always cleaned the break room in the early morning hours, arriving before the executives to ensure their sacred space is pristine for their arrival. But now his timing has shifted by exactly 7 minutes, a change so minor it escapes notice, but significant enough to place him in the break room during the precise window when Marcus performs his coffee ritual. The first morning, Marcus finds his latte slightly bitter, the milk texture not quite right. An annoyance, nothing more, easily attributed to a machine in need of maintenance. He mentions it to Jennifer with the casual entitlement of someone accustomed to having minor inconveniences resolved by others. By the third morning, the pattern has become impossible to ignore. Every cup Marcus prepares tastes wrong, sometimes too bitter, sometimes too sweet, occasionally with an odd metallic aftertaste that lingers unpleasantly. The machine tests perfectly when maintenance checks it. The coffee beans are fresh, the milk properly stored. Yet somehow, Marcus's morning ritual has been corrupted in ways that defy logical explanation. Chen, methodically wiping down counters nearby, observes Marcus's growing frustration with the serene expression of someone who understands that small discomforts can accumulate into profound unease. In his youth, his master had taught him that a warrior's greatest weapon is often patience, the ability to apply pressure so gradually that the enemy defeats themselves through their own escalating reactions. "The machine hates me," Marcus mutters on the fourth morning, his usual confidence already showing hairline cracks. "It's like the damn thing is personal." "Perhaps," Chen suggests quietly, not looking up from his work. "Machines reflect the energy we bring to them." The comment seems innocuous, even philosophical, but something in Chen's tone makes Marcus glance at him sharply. For just a moment, the janitor's reflection in the polished coffee machine seems to show someone entirely different, someone whose understanding of cause and effect runs far deeper than simple mechanical maintenance. But the coffee is only the beginning. Marcus's office, once a sanctuary of perfectly controlled environment, begins to develop inexplicable quirks. His ergonomic chair starts squeaking at frequencies that set his teeth on edge, but only when he sits in it. When others test it, the sound mysteriously disappears. His computer monitor develops a subtle flicker that's invisible to IT technicians, but drives him to distraction during long video conferences. Most unsettling of all, his desk lamp begins casting shadows that seem wrong somehow, angular shapes that fall across his paperwork in ways that make reading uncomfortable, creating an atmosphere of unease that grows stronger each day. Each problem is minor, easily dismissed as coincidence or the normal entropy of office equipment. But taken together, they create a pattern of persistent irritation that begins to erode Marcus's legendary composure. His usually sharp presentations become slightly off-kilter, his confident decision-making plagued by second-guessing, his casual cruelty toward others tinged with the desperation of someone whose own world has become unpredictably hostile. Chen watches it all with the patient attention of a master craftsman observing his work. During his cleaning rounds, he makes minute adjustments that would be invisible to anyone not trained to see them. A slight repositioning of the chair's hydraulic mechanism, a barely perceptible change in the monitor's angle, a subtle alteration in the lamp's position that transforms functional lighting into a source of constant visual stress. It's psychological warfare elevated to an art form, each move calculated to create maximum discomfort with minimal detectability. Marcus begins to suspect sabotage, but can never quite prove it, his paranoia growing with each failed attempt to identify the source of his mounting difficulties. Meanwhile, Chen's apparent concern for Marcus's well-being becomes a source of additional frustration. Every morning, the janitor inquires politely about Marcus's comfort, offering helpful suggestions about posture and stress management with a sincerity that feels somehow mocking. His advice is always technically sound, medically appropriate, and completely useless for problems he appears not to understand. "You seem tense this morning, Mr. Henderson," Chen observes, watching Marcus struggle with his malfunctioning chair. "Perhaps a brief walk outside would help reset your energy." Marcus's response is a barely controlled snarl, but he can't quite articulate why the suggestion feels like an insult rather than genuine concern. There's something in Chen's tone, in the way his eyes seem to see too much, that transforms every interaction into a test Marcus feels he's failing. But Chen's campaign extends beyond individual harassment into the realm of social dynamics, where his understanding of human nature becomes his most powerful weapon. He begins to subtly undermine Marcus's position within the office hierarchy, not through direct confrontation, but through the careful cultivation of doubt and uncertainty among his colleagues. It starts with small observations, delivered with the apparent innocence of someone who notices details others miss. During conversations about Marcus's latest projects, Chen might quietly mention discrepancies he's observed while cleaning, invoices left on desks that don't match reported figures, calendar appointments that suggest different priorities than publicly stated ones, phone conversations overheard during his invisible presence that contradict official positions. Chen never makes accusations, never suggests impropriety. He simply shares observations with the wide-eyed guilelessness of someone who assumes all information is equally innocent. But his timing is perfect, his audience carefully chosen, and the cumulative effect is devastating. Jennifer Walsh, Marcus's most reliable ally, finds herself questioning loyalties she never thought to examine. "Have you noticed Marcus has been different lately?" she asks Sarah during a breakroom conversation, unaware that Chen is methodically restocking supplies nearby. More paranoid, more defensive about everything. Sarah, who has been watching Chen's subtle campaign with growing fascination, chooses her words carefully. Maybe the stress is getting to him. Success can be as challenging as failure sometimes. Chen continues his work without acknowledging the conversation, but Sarah catches the slight pause in his movements, the way his attention seems to sharpen at certain phrases. She's beginning to understand that Chen doesn't just clean offices, he studies them, learning the rhythms and relationships that define the corporate ecosystem with the same attention a general might apply to enemy terrain. The tipping point comes during a staff meeting, where Marcus attempts to reassert his dominance through a presentation about quarterly performance metrics. He's prepared meticulously, but as he speaks, small things begin to go wrong. The projector bulb flickers intermittently, creating distracting light patterns. The air conditioning cycles on and off at irregular intervals, causing temperature fluctuations that make everyone uncomfortable. His notes, perfectly organized that morning, seem to have been subtly rearranged, creating confusion in his carefully rehearsed delivery. Chen enters the conference room midway through the presentation, pushing his cart with apologetic efficiency. He moves around the perimeter of the room, emptying waste baskets and wiping down surfaces with movements so quiet and unobtrusive they should be forgettable. Yet somehow his presence becomes a distraction that Marcus can't ignore. Every time Marcus glances in Chen's direction, he finds the janitor focused intently on his work, paying no apparent attention to the presentation. But there's something in the older man's posture, in the way he moves around the room, that suggests he's absorbing every word, evaluating every claim, measuring the speaker against standards Marcus doesn't understand. The presentation stumbles to a conclusion that satisfies no one, least of all Marcus himself. As the staff files out, exchanging the kind of glances that suggest shared but unspoken doubts about their leader's competence, Marcus finds himself alone with Chen, who continues his cleaning with methodical persistence. "You," Marcus says suddenly, his voice tight with frustration and suspicion. "You're doing something. I don't know what, but you're doing something." Chen looks up from wiping down the conference table, his expression one of mild confusion. "I am cleaning, Mr. Henderson. Is there a problem with my work?" "Cut the act," Marcus snarls, moving closer with aggressive intent. "I know you're screwing with me somehow. The coffee, the chair, all of it. I just can't figure out how." Chen sets down his cloth and considers Marcus with the patient attention of someone examining an interesting but not particularly dangerous insect. When he speaks, his voice carries the weight of absolute certainty wrapped in apparent concern. "Mr. Henderson," he says gently, "I think perhaps the stress of your position is affecting your perception. When we look for enemies in every shadow, we often create the very conflicts we fear most." The words are spoken with such sincere compassion that they feel like a slap across Marcus's face. But more disturbing than the content is the recognition that Chen is right. Marcus has become paranoid, suspicious, prone to seeing conspiracies in coincidences. The realization that his enemy has driven him to doubt his own sanity is more unsettling than any direct confrontation could be. As Chen returns to his work, Marcus finds himself wondering if he's losing his mind, or if he's finally beginning to see clearly for the first time in years. Either possibility terrifies him more than he's willing to admit. But what Marcus doesn't understand is that he's not just being defeated, he's being educated. Each small humiliation, each moment of doubt, each crack in his carefully constructed confidence is designed to teach him something his privilege has never allowed him to learn, what it feels like to be powerless in the face of forces beyond his control. And Chen, patient as mountains and inexorable as tides, has only just begun to apply the lessons his master taught him about the art of winning without fighting. There comes a moment in every carefully constructed deception when the mask becomes too heavy to wear and the truth beneath demands to be seen, not as revelation, but as inevitability. The unraveling begins with Jennifer Walsh's curiosity, though she would later wish she had never given in to the nagging suspicions that had been building for weeks. Marcus's growing paranoia has infected his inner circle, creating an atmosphere of distrust that transforms allies into investigators. When rational explanations fail to account for the systematic degradation of Marcus's professional composure, those closest to him begin looking for answers in increasingly desperate places. It's Jennifer who first suggests hiring a private investigator to look into Chen's background. "There's something off about him," she insists during a clandestine meeting in Marcus's office after hours. The way he moves, the things he says, how he seems to know things he shouldn't. We need to find out who he really is. Marcus, his usual confidence eroded by weeks of inexplicable setbacks, agrees with the desperate enthusiasm of someone grasping for any explanation that doesn't require admitting his own inadequacy. The investigator they hire, a tired-looking man named Rodriguez, who specializes in employment verification and background checks, promises discretion and thorough results within a week. What Rodriguez discovers defies every expectation they brought to his shabby downtown office. Chen Wei, the elderly janitor who has cleaned their floors for 3 years, doesn't exist. The social security number on his employment records belongs to a man who died in San Francisco 15 years ago. The address listed on his application leads to a vacant lot that's been empty for a decade. His employment history, when traced backward, dissolves into a web of false identities and carefully crafted documentation that speaks of resources and expertise far beyond what any legitimate janitor would possess. But it's the photograph Rodriguez shows them that makes Jennifer's breath catch in her throat and Marcus's face drain of color. The image is grainy, clearly taken from surveillance footage, but unmistakably shows their humble janitor in what appears to be a very different context. He's standing in what looks like a government building, surrounded by men in expensive suits who defer to him with the body language of subordinates addressing a superior. The timestamp indicates the photo was taken just 6 months before Chen began working at Meridian Tower. I couldn't get details about what kind of work he was doing, Rodriguez explains, his voice carrying the professional caution of someone who has stumbled into waters deeper than his usual assignments. The agencies involved aren't the type that share information with private investigators. But I can tell you this, whatever your janitor was before he started pushing a mop, it wasn't anything ordinary. Rodriguez slides another document across his desk, this one a partial military record that raises more questions than it answers. Chen's name appears on a classified roster from the 1980s, associated with a training program that's heavily redacted. The few visible details mention specialized combat instruction and cultural liaison duties before the text disappears behind black bars that suggest secrets still considered sensitive decades later. Here's what I think happened, Rodriguez continues, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Your guy is probably former military intelligence, maybe CIA, possibly something even more classified. Men like that don't just retire and become janitors unless they're running from something or hiding from someone. The implications hit Marcus and Jennifer like physical blows. The harmless old man they've been tormenting, the submissive immigrant they've treated as barely human, is revealed to be someone whose true capabilities exist entirely outside their understanding of how the world works. But revelation brings its own momentum, and Marcus's response to fear has always been escalation. We have to confront him, he declares, his voice shaking with a mixture of rage and terror. If he's some kind of spy or whatever, we can't just let him keep working here. Who knows what he's really doing, what information he has access to? Jennifer, usually Marcus's most reliable enabler, hesitates. Maybe we should just report this to security, let them handle it. If he's really what Rodriguez thinks he is, then what? Marcus interrupts, his paranoia now finding focus in a target he can finally see clearly. Let him disappear and start over somewhere else? Let him get away with whatever game he's been playing with us? The confrontation Marcus orchestrates is designed to corner Chen in the executive conference room after hours, when the building is nearly empty and witnesses are few. Marcus arrives with Jennifer and 2 other colleagues he's convinced to participate through a combination of shared grievances and half-truths about Chen's deception. They find Chen exactly where they expect him, methodically cleaning the conference room windows as the sun sets over the city, his movements carrying the same unhurried precision they've observed for years. But now, armed with knowledge of his true background, every gesture seems transformed. The way he holds the cleaning cloth suggests familiarity with tools more dangerous than squeegees. The measured rhythm of his work speaks of discipline, acquired in contexts far more serious than janitorial training. "We know who you are," Marcus announces, without preamble, his voice cracking with the strain of trying to project authority while confronting someone whose real capabilities remain unknown. "We know about the false identity, the military background, all of it." Chen doesn't stop cleaning the windows, but something in his posture shifts almost imperceptibly. The change is subtle but unmistakable, like watching a house cat suddenly reveal the predator that lives beneath its domestic facade. "Do you?" Chen asks quietly, his reflection in the glass showing a face that no longer makes any attempt to appear harmless. "And what exactly do you think you know?" Marcus pulls out Rodriguez's folder with trembling hands, spreading the documents across the conference table like evidence in a trial. "We know your real name isn't Chen Wei. We know you have military training, possibly intelligence background. We know you've been lying to everyone here for years." Chen sets down his cleaning supplies with deliberate care and turns to face his accusers. The transformation is so complete, it's as if a different person has stepped into the janitor's clothes. His spine straightens to its full height, his shoulders square with military precision, and his eyes hold depths that make Marcus understand with sudden horrible clarity that he has made a terrible mistake. "You know nothing," Chen says, his voice carrying a quiet authority that fills the conference room like water flooding a sealed chamber. "You have discovered fragments, shadows of truth, but you understand none of it." He moves toward the conference table with steps that seem to cover distance without effort, each footfall placing him in perfect balance, ready for whatever comes next. Marcus and his companions instinctively back away, their animal brains recognizing predatory movement even when their conscious minds refuse to accept what they're seeing. "My name," Chen continues, his tone conversational, but somehow more menacing than any shout could be, "is Chen Lin Wei. I was a master instructor in the arts of war and peace, trained in disciplines your culture has reduced to entertainment and mythology." He pauses beside the conference table, his fingers trailing across its polished surface with the casual familiarity of someone who has spent decades learning to find balance and leverage in any environment. "I served my country in ways that will never appear in public records, protecting secrets that lesser men died rather than reveal. I have walked through conflicts you will never read about in history books, carrying responsibilities that would crush minds unprepared for their weight." Jennifer finds her voice, though it emerges as barely more than a whisper. "Why are you here? Why are you pretending to be a janitor?" Chen's smile carries no warmth, only the recognition of someone who has been asked the right question at last. "Because I made a promise to a dying man, my master, my teacher, the closest thing to a father I ever knew. I promised him I would disappear from the world of conflict, would find peace in invisibility, would never again use what he taught me except to preserve life." His gaze moves from face to face, measuring each person against standards they can't comprehend. "For 3 years I have kept that promise. I have endured your casual cruelties, your assumptions about my worth, your treatment of me as something less than human. I have cleaned your messes, listened to your boasts, watched you abuse your small powers over those who cannot defend themselves." The temperature in the room seems to drop as Chen's voice takes on edges that cut deeper than anger. But promises, even sacred ones, must sometimes bend before higher principles. And you, all of you, have pushed beyond the boundaries of what any man should be expected to endure in silence." Marcus, his face pale and slick with sweat, tries to reassert control through volume and aggression. "Are you threatening us? Because if you are, we'll call security. Have you arrested for—" The words die in his throat as Chen takes a single step forward, The movement is fluid, controlled, and somehow inevitable, like watching an avalanche begin with the displacement of a single stone. Marcus finds himself frozen, every instinct screaming that he has awakened something far more dangerous than he ever imagined possible. "I am not threatening anyone," Chen says, his voice carrying the weight of absolute certainty. "I am simply acknowledging that my time of hiding has come to an end. The mask you have forced me to remove cannot be put back on." He turns away from them, moving toward the conference room's wall of windows where the city lights are beginning to twinkle in the gathering dusk. His reflection in the glass shows not the submissive janitor they thought they knew, but someone whose presence seems to expand to fill available space, a master of disciplines they don't understand, trained in arts that most people believe exist only in movies. "Tomorrow," Chen says without turning around, "you will find a letter of resignation on your desk. Zhenwei, the janitor, will disappear as completely as if he never existed. What emerges from that absence, that remains to be seen. The silence that follows is profound and terrifying." Marcus and his accomplices stand frozen, suddenly understanding that they have not exposed a fraud, but awakened something that was better left sleeping. The revelation they sought has transformed from victory to disaster, showing them not weakness to exploit, but power beyond their ability to comprehend or control. But as they stand there in the gathering darkness, none of them realizes that Chen's words carry a double meaning. Tomorrow will indeed bring change, but not the quiet disappearance they're expecting. Instead, it will mark the beginning of a reckoning that will force everyone at Meridian Tower to confront the true cost of their carefully maintained cruelties. Because some truths, once revealed, demand justice, and masters of ancient arts understand better than most that justice delayed is justice denied. There comes a moment in every carefully constructed deception when the mask becomes too heavy to wear, and the truth beneath demands to be seen, not as revelation, but as inevitability. The unraveling begins with Jennifer Walsh's curiosity, though she would later wish she had never given in to the nagging suspicions that had been building for weeks. Marcus's growing paranoia has infected his inner circle, creating an atmosphere of distrust that transforms allies into investigators. When rational explanations fail to account for the systematic degradation of Marcus's professional composure, those closest to him begin looking for answers in increasingly desperate places. It's Jennifer who first suggests hiring a private investigator to look into Chen's background. "There's something off about him," she insists during a clandestine meeting in Marcus's office after hours. "The way he moves, the things he says, how he seems to know things he shouldn't. We need to find out who he really is." Marcus, his usual confidence eroded by weeks of inexplicable setbacks, agrees with the desperate enthusiasm of someone grasping for any explanation that doesn't require admitting his own inadequacy. The investigator they hire, a tired-looking man named Rodriguez, who specializes in employment verification and background checks, promises discretion and thorough results within a week. What Rodriguez discovers defies every expectation they brought to his shabby downtown office. Chen Wei, the elderly janitor who has cleaned their floors for 3 years, doesn't exist. The social security number on his employment records belongs to a man who died in San Francisco 15 years ago. The address listed on his application leads to a vacant lot that's been empty for a decade. His employment history, when traced backward, dissolves into a web of false identities and carefully crafted documentation that speaks of resources and expertise far beyond what any legitimate janitor would possess. But it's the photograph Rodriguez shows them that makes Jennifer's breath catch in her throat and Marcus's face drain of color. The image is grainy, clearly taken from surveillance footage, but unmistakably shows their humble janitor in what appears to be a very different context. He's standing in what looks like a government building, surrounded by men in expensive suits who defer to him with the body language of subordinates addressing a superior. The timestamp indicates the photo was taken just 6 months before Chen began working at Meridian Tower. I couldn't get details about what kind of work he was doing, Rodriguez explains, his voice carrying the professional caution of someone who has stumbled into waters deeper than his usual assignments. The agencies involved aren't the type that share information with private investigators. But I can tell you this, whatever your janitor was before he started pushing a mop, it wasn't anything ordinary. Rodriguez slides another document across his desk, this one a partial military record that raises more questions than it answers. Chen's name appears on a classified roster from the 1980s, associated with a training program that's heavily redacted. The few visible details mention specialized combat instruction and cultural liaison duties before the text disappears behind black bars that suggest secrets still considered sensitive decades later. Here's what I think happened, Rodriguez continues, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Your guy is probably former military intelligence, maybe CIA, possibly something even more classified. Men like that don't just retire and become janitors unless they're running from something or hiding from someone. The implications hit Marcus and Jennifer like physical blows. The harmless old man they've been tormenting, the submissive immigrant they've treated as barely human, is revealed to be someone whose true capabilities exist entirely outside their understanding of how the world works. But revelation brings its own momentum, and Marcus's response to fear has always been escalation. We have to confront him, he declares, his voice shaking with a mixture of rage and terror. If he's some kind of spy or whatever, we can't just let him keep working here. Who knows what he's really doing, what information he has access to? Jennifer, usually Marcus's most reliable enabler, hesitates. Maybe we should just report this to security, let them handle it. If he's really what Rodriguez thinks he is, then what? Marcus interrupts, his paranoia now finding focus in a target he can finally see clearly. Let him disappear and start over somewhere else? Let him get away with whatever game he's been playing with us? The confrontation Marcus orchestrates is designed to corner Chen in the executive conference room after hours, when the building is nearly empty and witnesses are few. Marcus arrives with Jennifer and 2 other colleagues he's convinced to participate through a combination of shared grievances and half-truths about Chen's deception. They find Chen exactly where they expect him, methodically cleaning the conference room windows as the sun sets over the city, his movements carrying the same unhurried precision they've observed for years. But now, armed with knowledge of his true background, every gesture seems transformed. The way he holds the cleaning cloth suggests familiarity with tools more dangerous than squeegees. The measured rhythm of his work speaks of discipline acquired in contexts far more serious than janitorial training. We know who you are, Marcus announces without preamble, his voice cracking with the strain of trying to project authority while confronting someone whose real capabilities remain unknown. We know about the false identity, the military background, all of it. Chen doesn't stop cleaning the windows, but something in his posture shifts almost imperceptibly. The change is subtle, but unmistakable, like watching a house cat suddenly reveal the predator that lives beneath its domestic facade. Do you? Chen asks quietly, his reflection in the glass showing a face that no longer makes any attempt to appear harmless. And what exactly do you think you know? Marcus pulls out Rodriguez's folder with trembling hands, spreading the documents across the conference table like evidence in a trial. We know your real name isn't Chen Wei. We know you have military training, possibly intelligence background. We know you've been lying to everyone here for years. Chen sets down his cleaning supplies with deliberate care and turns to face his accusers. The transformation is so complete, it's as if a different person has stepped into the janitor's clothes. His spine straightens to its full height, his shoulders square with military precision, and his eyes, His eyes hold depths that make Marcus understand with sudden horrible clarity that he has made a terrible mistake. "You know nothing," Chen says, his voice carrying a quiet authority that fills the conference room like water flooding a sealed chamber. "You have discovered fragments, shadows of truth, but you understand none of it." He moves toward the conference table with steps that seem to cover distance without effort, each footfall placing him in perfect balance, ready for whatever comes next. Marcus and his companions instinctively back away, their animal brains recognizing predatory movement even when their conscious minds refuse to accept what they're seeing. "My name," Chen continues, his tone conversational, but somehow more menacing than any shout could be, "is Chen Lin Wei. Was a master instructor in the arts of war and peace, trained in disciplines your culture has reduced to entertainment and mythology." He pauses beside the conference table, his fingers trailing across its polished surface with the casual familiarity of someone who has spent decades learning to find balance and leverage in any environment. "I served my country in ways that will never appear in public records, protecting secrets that lesser men died rather than reveal. I have walked through conflicts you will never read about in history books, carrying responsibilities that would crush minds unprepared for their weight." Jennifer finds her voice, though it emerges as barely more than a whisper. "Why are you here? Why are you pretending to be a janitor?" Chen's smile carries no warmth, only the recognition of someone who has been asked the right question at last. "Because I made a promise to a dying man. My master, my teacher, the closest thing to a father I ever knew. I promised him I would disappear from the world of conflict, would find peace in invisibility, would never again use what he taught me except to preserve life." His gaze moves from face to face, measuring each person against standards they can't comprehend. "For 3 years I have kept that promise. I have endured your casual cruelties, your assumptions about my worth, your treatment of me as something less than human. I have cleaned your messes, listened to your boasts, watched you abuse your small powers over those who cannot defend themselves." The temperature in the room seems to drop as Chen's voice takes on edges that cut deeper than anger. But promises, even sacred ones, must sometimes bend before higher principles. And you, all of you, have pushed beyond the boundaries of what any man should be expected to endure in silence." Marcus, his face pale and slick with sweat, tries to reassert control through volume and aggression. "Are you threatening us? Because if you are, we'll call security. Have you arrested for—" The words die in his throat as Chen takes a single step forward. The movement is fluid, controlled, and somehow inevitable, like watching an avalanche begin with the displacement of a single stone. Marcus finds himself frozen, every instinct screaming that he has awakened something far more dangerous than he ever imagined possible. "I am not threatening anyone," Chen says, his voice carrying the weight of absolute certainty. "I am simply acknowledging that my time of hiding has come to an end. The mask you have forced me to remove cannot be put back on." He turns away from them, moving toward the conference room's wall of windows where the city lights are beginning to twinkle in the gathering dusk. His reflection in the glass shows not the submissive janitor they thought they knew, but someone whose presence seems to expand to fill available space. A master of disciplines they don't understand, trained in arts that most people believe exist only in movies. "Tomorrow," Chen says without turning around, "you will find a letter of resignation on your desk. Zhenwei, the janitor, will disappear as completely as if he never existed. What emerges from that absence? That remains to be seen. The silence that follows is profound and terrifying." Marcus and his accomplices stand frozen, suddenly understanding that they have not exposed a fraud, but awakened something that was better left sleeping. The revelation they sought has transformed from victory to disaster, showing them not weakness to exploit, but power beyond their ability to comprehend or control. But as they stand there in the gathering darkness, None of them realizes that Chen's words carry a double meaning. Tomorrow will indeed bring change, but not the quiet disappearance they're expecting. Instead, it will mark the beginning of a reckoning that will force everyone at Meridian Tower to confront the true cost of their carefully maintained cruelties. Because some truths, once revealed, demand justice, and masters of ancient arts understand better than most that justice delayed is justice denied. The greatest victory is not the defeat of an enemy, but the transformation of understanding that makes future conflicts unnecessary. Dawn breaks over Meridian Tower with the soft persistence of truth revealing itself, casting long shadows that gradually give way to clarity. Sarah Martinez arrives early, as has become her habit in recent weeks, drawn by an intuition she can't quite name. The building feels different this morning, charged with the electricity of impending change, like the moment before thunder breaks after a long night of distant lightning. She finds Chen's resignation letter exactly where he promised it would be, placed with characteristic precision in the center of Marcus Henderson's desk. The envelope bears only Marcus's name in calligraphy, so perfect it seems carved rather than written, each stroke carrying the weight of traditions that span centuries. But it's not the only item Chen has left behind. Scattered across the executive floor, placed with surgical precision where they cannot be ignored or dismissed, are documents that tell stories Marcus and his colleagues never imagined existed. Personnel files that reveal systematic harassment patterns extending back years. Audio recordings, apparently captured by building security systems, that document conversations no civilized workplace should tolerate. Financial records that expose expense account irregularities, client billing discrepancies, and other small corruptions that accumulate into a damning portrait of corporate misconduct. Each piece of evidence bears the hallmarks of Chen's meticulous attention to detail, gathered during 3 years of invisible observation and filed away with the patience of someone who understands that justice sometimes requires perfect timing rather than immediate action. Marcus arrives to find his career dissolving before his eyes, each document a precision strike against the foundations of his professional existence. But it's the personal note Chen has included with the evidence that delivers the killing blow, not to Marcus's livelihood, but to his understanding of himself. Mr. Henderson, the note begins in that same perfect calligraphy. A master's greatest responsibility is not to demonstrate power, but to teach wisdom to those who lack it. You have provided me with an opportunity to fulfill this responsibility in ways I never expected. The evidence you see before you represents 3 years of patient observation, during which I documented not just your actions, but the systematic cruelty that passes for leadership in your organization. I could have destroyed you at any time, your careers, your reputations, your futures. Instead, I chose to give you something far more valuable, the chance to understand what it feels like to be powerless in the face of forces beyond your control. Every small humiliation you experienced, every moment of doubt and frustration, every instance where your carefully constructed confidence cracked, these were not punishments, but lessons. Lessons in empathy, in humility, in the recognition that true strength comes not from the ability to inflict suffering, but from the wisdom to prevent it. You have been taught by a master, Mr. Henderson, though you never realized you were in school. The question now is whether you are capable of learning from the experience, or whether you will continue to see yourself as a victim rather than a student. The choice, as always, is yours. Chen Lin Wei. By mid-morning, word of Marcus's downfall has spread through Meridian Tower with the speed of wildfire through dry grass. Jennifer Walsh finds herself called into emergency meetings with senior management, where she's forced to explain her role in the systematic harassment that Chen's evidence has exposed. The private investigator's report, which seemed like such a clever move just days before, now stands as proof of corporate misconduct that the company's legal team views with barely concealed horror. But it's David Kim who first notices the deeper implications of Chen's revelation. The young intern, still processing his rescue from Marcus's cruelty, spends his lunch break researching the name Chen Lin Wei, following digital breadcrumbs that lead to fragments of a story more remarkable than any corporate drama. Academic papers on conflict resolution and cultural integration, co-authored by CL. We in the 1990s. Military commendations for unnamed operations in classified theaters. References in scholarly works on Eastern philosophy and martial arts that speak of a master teacher whose influence extended far beyond any single discipline. Most intriguing of all, David discovers a newspaper article from 5 years ago about the death of Master Liu Fengming, described as the last living link to classical Chinese martial traditions. The article mentions that Master Liu's final student, identified only as Master Chen, disappeared from public life following his teacher's death, honoring a promise to abandon the world of conflict in favor of peaceful obscurity. The picture that emerges is of a man whose true capabilities exist entirely outside the mundane concerns of corporate hierarchies. Someone for whom the choice to become invisible was not defeat, but the ultimate expression of mastery. Sarah finds David in the break room, surrounded by printouts and looking like someone who has stumbled upon a secret that changes everything he thought he knew about the world. He wasn't hiding from something, David says, his voice filled with wonder. He was hiding himself, protecting people from what he was capable of. Sarah sinks into the chair beside him, pieces of a puzzle she's been unconsciously assembling for months, finally clicking into place. The way he moved, the things he said, how he seemed to see everything. She trails off, remembering dozens of small moments that now carry entirely different meanings. We were watching a master. David continues, his academic mind struggling to process the implications. Someone trained in disciplines we can't even comprehend, choosing to empty trash cans and mop floors because he made a promise to a dying teacher. The revelation spreads through the office like ripples from a stone dropped in still water, transforming not just understanding of recent events, but forcing a fundamental reconsideration of assumptions about strength, worth, and the nature of true power. Conversations that seemed casual yesterday now carry weight, moments of kindness and cruelty alike re-examined through the lens of Chen's true identity. By afternoon, Meridian Tower has become a very different place. Marcus Henderson clears out his office under the watchful eyes of security, his career in ruins, but his education in humility just beginning. Jennifer Walsh faces disciplinary hearings that will likely end her employment, while their collaborators in workplace cruelty find themselves scrambling to distance themselves from documented patterns of abuse. But it's the smaller changes that prove most significant. Employees who once ignored or mistreated service workers find themselves offering genuine greetings and thanks. The casual hierarchies that defined office interactions begin to soften as people recognize that worth cannot be measured by job titles or paychecks alone. In the days that follow, stories emerge from unexpected places. The security guard reveals that Chen often stayed late to help elderly cleaning staff with heavy equipment, never speaking of it, but always appearing when assistance was needed. The cafeteria workers share memories of Chen's quiet interventions when customers became abusive, his presence somehow diffusing tensions without confrontation. A maintenance worker tells of finding Chen in the prayer garden one evening, moving through forms so beautiful and precise they seemed like a conversation with invisible forces. When asked about it later, Chen had simply smiled and said that some prayers are best expressed through action rather than words. Each story adds another layer to the understanding of who Chen Lin Wei really was during his time among them, Not just a master hiding in plain sight, but someone actively working to make the world around him a more compassionate place. One small intervention at a time. 3 weeks after Chen's disappearance, Sarah receives an envelope with no return address, containing a single photograph and a brief note. The image shows Chen in what appears to be a community center, teaching basic self-defense to a group of elderly immigrants. He's wearing simple clothes, his face serene and focused, demonstrating techniques that bridge the gap between ancient wisdom and modern necessity. The note is brief but meaningful. Ms. Martinez, thank you for seeing beyond appearances and recognizing dignity where others saw only invisibility. True strength always reveals itself to those with eyes to see. May you continue to look deeply and act with courage. CLW. As autumn settles over the city, Meridian Tower has become a place where people hold doors for each other, where acknowledgement replaces invisibility, where the lessons of a hidden master continue to ripple outward in ways both subtle and profound. Not because Chen's revelation forced change through fear or intimidation, but because his example demonstrated that true power lies not in domination, but in the quiet cultivation of dignity and respect. David Kim, now confident and thriving in his role, often pauses at the window of the conference room where everything changed. He thinks about the old man who taught him that accuracy in small matters reveals larger truths, and he applies that principle not just to financial analysis, but to the daily choices that define character. Sarah Martinez has become an advocate for workplace dignity, using Chen's example to push for policies that protect vulnerable employees from the kind of systemic abuse that once seemed inevitable. She carries with her the memory of someone who chose invisibility not from weakness, but from strength, and who revealed himself only when others needed protection. In the end, Chen Linwei's greatest lesson was not about martial arts or hidden identities or the exposure of workplace bullies. It was about recognition, the radical act of seeing each person's inherent worth, regardless of their position or power. About understanding that true mastery expresses itself not in dominance over others, but in service to principles larger than oneself. And perhaps most importantly, about the truth that strength disguised as weakness is far more powerful than weakness disguised as strength. A lesson that continues to echo through the halls of Meridian Tower long after the teacher himself has moved on to whatever mission awaits a master whose work is never truly finished. E essa história te tocou? Compartilhe nos comentários o que mais mexeu com você. E envie esse vídeo a alguém que precisa ouvir isso hoje. The next time you encounter someone society has taught you to overlook, the janitor, the server, the person whose work keeps your world functioning, but whose presence you barely acknowledge, remember Chen Linwei. Remember that greatness often wears the humblest disguises, and that the most profound teachers are sometimes those who seem to have the least to offer. In a world that measures worth by wealth and power by position, perhaps the greatest revolution is simply learning to see, really see, the dignity and potential that exists in every human being, waiting for recognition to call it forth.